good there.
Yep, we see it now. Thanks.
Okay. Okay.
Hi, Chris. I just wanted to let you know we're waiting on one more trustee. When he comes, I'll let you know and we can start the work session.
Sounds good. Thank you. And I'm sharing my screen, but you're not seeing my video, so I'll start my video here, and
It
kind
looks
of
like
makes it
you
look
had
like I
ears.
had, yeah, it looked like I had some Mickey Mouse ears, didn't it? All right.
Chris, actually, our last trustee is going to be about 10 minutes late, so we can start without him. Yeah, to get through everything, all your content.
All right. Well, I have flown through this presentation in an hour at probably record speed, and I have dragged it out with questions lasting more than 2 hours. So I'll try to keep it to an hour and a half or less, but I would like to give an opportunity for discussion, for input from the board. And please try to stop me if you need clarification on any portion of the presentation. So with that, I'll get started with my my presentation. Okay, so my name is Chris Brandwy. I do think it's important to primarily, or to start off with, sort of my qualifications for why I have this expertise. I do have a professional engineering license. I am actively consulting on several small system projects, water and wastewater. I am a certified water professional, so I'm not at the level of John Seitz, but I am at the entry level for as a certified water operator. So I operate a hot springs, a mobile home park, a preschool, and that says 3, but now I just picked up a wedding venue. So I operate 4 small systems. And so I know a lot of the work that John does. I don't pretend to have the experience that John has, but been there. For prior to starting my consulting firm, I worked for a nonprofit, RCAC. I believe RCAC is assisting in your letter of conditions currently. And
Yes.
so I did probably somewhere around 80 rate studies over those 5 years in every corner from Dinosaur to Springfield. From I didn't do a rate study in Cortez, but I did some work in Cortez and I did some work out in Ray. So I've been all over the state working with small systems, working with small boards. My education there, I have my undergraduate in civil environmental engineering. I have a master's degree also from Ohio State. And my thesis was on estimating remediation tools for Ohio Department of Transportation. So estimating costs, finances has been something I've always worked on. I am a honorably discharged veteran. And then my most recent addition here to this list of qualifications is this summer I volunteered to be on the board of my brother's water system. And in the first meeting, I spoke with too much knowledge and they made me vice president. So board members there in the room, I know that a lot of you are new, and it is kind of an undertaking. I would encourage you to keep track of the number of hours that you spend. I think I'm up to 40 hours this year of volunteer board work, but I do find it really rewarding, and I like the aspect of being a part of the community. So that's who I am in a nutshell, and why I'm in the position to be able to kind of lecture and educate you on rates today. We're going to go into asset management. That is an effort that I know John has had an intern, I believe, put together an asset management plan for you. So that is incorporated into the rate study, or the 2 rate models. There's also, with that, you have an asset inventory. So all of the major components of your system are in a list, when they're going to fail, when they need to be replaced, how much that's going to cost, so that we can be prepared for that in the future. And then we will introduce rate structures. There are several different types of rate structures. I don't see you guys changing your rate structure, since yours is probably the most sophisticated of the levels that we could be at. I wouldn't dumb it down, is what I'm saying. And then we'll go through some, if we have time, if we don't get bogged down with questions, we'll go through some examples of how the different rate structures can generate different revenue. So let's jump into asset management. So the objective of asset management is we're going to understand what are the benefits and goals and concepts of asset management, what is in an asset inventory. Infrastructure wears out. So, you might have some really old components that your operation team is trying to keep together. But you can either be reactive and wait till it breaks, or you can be proactive and plan for replacement, and not wait for a catastrophe. So the need for asset management, you're going to have aging infrastructure. With that, you're going to want to be able to plan for the funding. And then with that also, why, your typical customers might ask, why is there this plant investment fee in my bill? I don't want to invest in this. I just want to pay my bill. So educating the public about that is a crucial part of getting to sustainable rates. So here, this next slide really talks about this is a problem all over the place, small and large systems, but the American Society of Civil Engineering has given the report card for water infrastructure a C minus. So that's just barely passable. So it's an issue all across the country. It's not something that just Silverton is working through. The towns, the smaller pool of customers, the more challenging it can be. So what are the assets? You've got all these physical systems. You've got pumps. You've got, I don't believe you guys have any wells, but you have water. You have river intakes. You've got water treatment plants. All those pumps require maintenance. They require material, fuel, electricity, utilities, all that stuff. And so you want to know how they are deteriorating over time, and you want to be able to plan for a pump that's going to go out. John probably knows how long each pump in the system is going to last, but until that is concisely put into a asset management plan, it's hard for the board to understand why we're saving money for something that's going to break in the future. So the key questions: what do we own? How long is it going to last? How to get the most out of the asset while it's still serving the needs. And so this is all sort of the high level of what John and I have worked over the past months to get into a pretty detailed Excel spreadsheet that has all these columns filled out, and then that becomes a part of the rate study. So what is asset management? the definition there is, we're going to call it a systematic process for maintaining a desired level of service at the best appropriate cost. So essentially, we're balancing what is, what is the level of service that we want to provide, and the cost that is affordable to the customers. So the benefits of an asset management plan: you're going to have a better operating decisions, and which might save time and money. Better communication to your customers, and that also leads into better service. And then also, believe it or not, when you have your ducks in a row, the state revolving fund and the federal loan and grant agencies are going to see you as a better borrower. And a lot of times they kind of force you to do this if you haven't done it already. And it also allows you to be proactive in managing your assets and being prepared for failures, as opposed to reactive. And the reactive approach might mean your service is compromised for some length of time while after you have an emergency or a failure. So the five core components here: we have an asset inventory. We want to maintain a level of service. We want to know what's critical. If you have only one water tank, then that is a very critical component to your system. Life cycle costs, how do we get the most out of the item that we're talking about? And then also long-term funding. I know there's some pretty large $1 million projects on the horizon for Silverton. So having an understanding of how much longer you can operate what you currently have helps plan for replacing those items in the future and getting better funding. So the inventory: what do we own? Where is it? What's the condition? What's the useful life? And then what's its value? And the value really is kind of, in my mind, the most important thing, along with how many more years it's going to last. So that lets us know how much time we have to save for replacing a pump, for replacing a whole wastewater treatment plant, or whatever level of asset we're talking about. So the level of service, the definition there is the quality, quantity, reliability, and environmental standards of the service your system is providing. So level of service, you might be able to tangibly understand that easier on the water side, but basically you have enough pressure, it doesn't taste bad, it's safe. And on the wastewater side, that's where the environmental standards might come into that. We don't want to be discharging the wastewater that is going to cause degradation to the environment or to the downstream users of the stream that is receiving the water, that might be using that as their source of water. And so along with that, there are customer demands and satisfaction. That might be sufficient pressure, or water not being out. Regulatory requirements, you don't want to hear that your system is getting fines from the CDPHE, the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, because eventually that can lead to fines for the system, which causes more cost. System performance and capabilities: you want your system to be able to provide drinking water, provide treatment of the sewage, and be able to do that under adverse conditions as well. Level of service: this is where we get pretty specific. So an example would be, over the next year, fewer than 5% of the customers will experience water loss lasting longer than 8 hours. So to speak about that, it's specific, it's measurable, it's achievable, and it's hopefully realistic and timely. And so if you don't know anything about a distribution system, that 5% of the customers could lose water lasting longer than 8 hours. And the reason why the rest of the 95% of the customers wouldn't lose water is because you have shutoff valves that if there's a leak, there's a problem in the distribution system, hopefully the crew can respond fast enough to isolate those leaks, shut off that portion only of the distribution system. And so maybe only one block of your town is going to go without water overnight as opposed to over the whole system. I know of a town in southern Colorado that had no shut off to their storage tank, and they had a leak. And so essentially what had to happen is the leak created a failure in the waters in the entire distribution system. They didn't have any valves, so they couldn't even shut off the water to keep the clean water in their tank. But it just had to leak through the hole in the ground that they exposed, and that came at a really hefty cost of calling a septic tank to suck the water out of the hole in the ground from the leaky pipe and all night long take it to the and dump it right into the wastewater lagoon. So hopefully I'm sure you guys have yeah, we've calculated, or we've inventoried all of your shutoff valves, so that's not going to be an issue for Silverton. Criticality, all assets fail, but it's important to know which assets are going to, be required to keep the system operational. So if you have one tank and its failure means no water to anybody in the system, that's a pretty critical item. And then so that speaks to both the consequences and we'll talk about the probability next, or in the following slides. But like life cycle costs, so here, this is where the goal is to determine the best appropriate cost for dealing with an asset as it ages and over time. So determining that cost to the benefit of each option is there, hopefully there's an operation and maintenance that's proactive, that's keeping the items in good working condition. Things do break, so repair. Some things might be able to be repaired on site or by your operators. Some things might have to be taken apart and rehabilitated, like pumps can be rewired, or in the question of a leaky pipe, that'd be you'd be replacing it on site. And so want to be able to know what resources have to be deployed for each asset that is super critical to your system. And then that's going to help you move from the reactive to a predictive maintenance. So if you've got if you know that your pipes are aging and they're prone to leaking, that might be something that you want to be, as a board, you're going to want to be able to approve John asking to have, several hundred linear feet of pipe on hand to be able to fix it in the middle of the night, as opposed to have to shut water off or shut sewage collection off for, a week or whatever it would take to get pipe hauled in. Long-term funding. So developing and implementing an effective funding plan based on those life cycles. That's something we'll see in future slides. I might bring up the model to show you your exact capital improvements plan. But this would help forecast revenue that's needed for major infrastructure coming down the line, or that's going to be required in the near future. Also, it might help you put the puzzle pieces together, as the slide there shows, of where are you going to find a grant that will match the funding with a loan that can make a $1 million project happen for a small town like Silverton. And then implement the needs, and then adjust as best you can by including that need into your reserves. So a lot of times, a grant and a loan package might require a little bit of cash to show the funders that you're able to fund these items. or fund these infrastructure projects. So the asset management plan, basically, we're going to try to keep in mind that developing a plan is based on the system's assets and provides a proactive approach to maintaining your service of utilities of water, sewer, and this could also be applied to your roads and your garbage utilities. So you want to keep in mind every year you want to look at the system's needs. You want to look at the current information that helps you meet those needs. Basically, listen to John. Listen to the review the asset management plans, the inventories that have been built for your system, and you want to do that on an annual basis. It's probably a good thing to do that just a little bit before the budget is finalized, at least in the budget building process. So just to go over this one more time, the current state of the assets is important. The level of service that we want to be able to provide also fits into understanding the critical components of your system. We want to understand the minimal life cycle costs, so the least cost for getting the most out of your each component, and then that all works into long-term funding, which helps you plan for improving or upgrading major component or major infrastructure pieces. This slide here, it's a little bit complex, but again, it's kind of repetitive. What are the current state of the assets? So you got a registry and asset performance and failure modes, determining how much life is left, determining the life cycle and replacement costs, what's required for the level of service. You want to be able to set targets and be able to meet those targets. Which assets are critical for sustaining performance, optimizing your operation and maintenance investments, capital investments, and then determining a funding strategy is kind of get towards the end of having an asset management plan. I call it a capital improvements plan. It's kind of both back and forth. It's sort of the same concept. So again, here's what makes up your inventory. This is an example for drinking water source. You guys, I don't believe you have wells. You have a river intake, and then you have storage tanks. You've got valves in your distribution system. I know you have hydrants, and then that's all probably on your main line. And then you have service lines that then lead into your house. So on the reverse of that, with the collection system or with sewer system, you've got a collection system, you've got manholes, and then you've got trunk collection pipes, and then you've got the wastewater treatment facility, and then it is returned to either the river or the ground to have that water return to the water cycle. So a condition asset, it's important to know that the nature of the failure, the possible timing of how long it's going to fail or how long before it's going to fail, and then you can take your preventative actions. The techniques, you can use previous data for the evaluation. Some could be visual inspection. I know I've heard I've adjusted some rate studies because the district manager went out with a backhoe and excavated up some of the pipe and, gave it sort of a visual inspection of what condition his 50-year-old pipes were in. And, he originally told me, well, they're 50 years, so they're probably going to have to be replaced pretty soon. But he did some potholing. He found that they were actually in really good shape. The unions were in good shape. And so we were able to add more years to the asset management for the distribution system. So that really verified and gave them a longer lifespan. Here's just a typical life expectancy chart here. So wells, well, you guys don't have wells, but those are last 35 years maybe. Intake structure, 35 to 40 years. Let's see, chlorination equipment, chlorine is really corrosive, so that's not going to last very long. Storage tanks, now this says 30 to 60 years. I have seen some storage tanks that are from the time of steam engines up into the 100 years and being well maintained. They have lasted the test of time. So that really is a more of a plug for proactive maintenance. Electrical systems, that's not going to last forever. Pipes, distribution pipes, 40 years is a good engineering number. There might be, the soil might be corrosive or aggressive, they say, and that might take into account the shorter life of a distribution pipe. Also, with PVC, we say that that's kind of such a new material that we think it might last up to 100 years, and that can be the case. But I've heard of uh, PVC pipes in California where they had forest fires. The PVC pipe will just melt in the ground. So everything has a different failure mode. Valves, that's to isolate your system. If your valves aren't exercised, they can break. And, I'll just try to bring this to home. I have a sink in my bathroom and I wanted to shut off the hot water valve for some reason. I don't know. And when I went to turn it, it probably hadn't been turned in 20 years and the valve dial broke. So now, I have exercising valves is important. That's the point there. Your meters, the meters, I've heard you get more like 25 years out of those, but when they do start failing, they start to fail in a way where they're counting less water. So that does directly relate to less revenue. And so, we could go through this list in detail, but I think you get the picture. Risk analysis. This is where we want to know what the probability is and what the consequence of the failure is. So it's kind of a risk matrix there. But how likely is it to fail, and how bad will it be if it fails? Is the question. There could be all these considerations on the probability of the condition, its age, how good or bad it's been maintained. There are environmental factors that could, forest fire, floods, earthquakes, that kind of thing could cause a failure. Is something being pushed beyond its design capacity, or is it just obsolete? If you've got obsolete parts in your system and you can't replace parts, then no matter how well it's being maintained, when they fail and you can't replace it, you gotta replace the whole thing. And then the consequences, there could be a reduction in level of service. There could be a cost to repair or replace. There could be collateral damage. Just the other day, I heard of a situation where a pipe was wrongly located and a homeowner dug into their yard and hit a main line, and that water drained out of the system for several hours and it flooded a neighbor's basement. So there could be issues like that. Not necessarily in that situation is something you could predict, but that might be why your system has liability insurance. Consequence of failure. This is a water main break in UCLA campus, 20 million gallons lost, but tons of cleanup as well, $13 million cleanup for a main break. So being proactive is important. And here's sort of the matrix I was alluding to before, where if you're in this area here with a low probability and a high consequence, that's going to equal to a moderate risk. But if you're in a high probability and a high consequence, that's going to be a really high risk. So you want to put your effort to eliminate those high probability, high consequence items. And conversely, if you've got low probability and low consequence, you're going to end up with a low risk. So that might be lower on your priority to fix or to prepare for. This curve probably comes more from like a pump, and it might work really well for the first half of its life, and then it's going to need to be bearings need to be repacked, coils need to be respun, and that might come at a cost, and then you might get another third of its life out of it. But then if you keep doing that with a pump, your return on that maintenance might dwindle over and over until it's not worth it to maintain, and it's the point where you really just want to replace it. So the point there is, at the level of a board member, you're probably not going to know this curve for every asset, but when your operators are telling you, hey, we've fixed it as much as we can, it just needs to be replaced, I'd say keep this in mind, that that you can replace things only, or repair things only, a couple of times before they're going to just need a whole replacement. So now, how do we plan for the future? We can pay as we go, we can save in advance, or we can borrow, we can get grants, or some kind of combination. And I will stop there and ask if anybody has any questions.
I guess I have a question if you can answer it. I was wondering, I see in the beginning that you got a C minus. Is that just Colorado itself for the infrastructure grade?
Believe that was nationwide.
Okay. Is there
Or
any
no.
study for just
No.
Silverton?
Actually, I'm take that back. I think that was Colorado for the C minus.
Okay,
And so
great.
Probably a deep.
And is there anything for Silverton? Do we have like an infrastructure grade ourselves or?
I would defer to John, and that might be sort of his
Okay.
gut feeling. But I know that you guys do have some major projects on the horizon. So I would say you're probably somewhere in that state average of around a C minus. But that's me as an outsider without having, really seen the system. A lot of your compliance data is publicly available. So, if you had a free weekend, you could dig into your previous sampling results and all that, any violations that you've had. But I'm sure John has a pretty good feel for that.
And we just posted our 2024 drinking water quality report in the newspaper.
The consumer confidence report.
Yeah. The water quality report.
Okay.
So that was just posted in the paper. It was supposed to be last week, but it ended up this week, which kind of goes over everything from, and I can send this all to you as well, because it's public, but if you missed the paper, but it talks about lead, it talks about, chlorine and copper, and kind of gives the breakdown of where we are and if we're out of compliance or not. And so we do make that public and we try and post that in the paper. But I can send this to you guys too.
And for the new trustees, it's super helpful to do that kind of field trip with John, to go up to the water treatment plant and go to wastewater, because then he'll really dive in on, how we get audited, how often, what we do about it, what's going into our water to treat it, what's coming out at the sewer.
Guys, visit the wastewater plant?
Right. I went with him last week, but I just didn't get those.
Yeah,
details of the
yeah,
study.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really insightful to just see the level of infrastructure that it takes to produce water, to treat the sewage, and all, just to have a little bit of a taste for what all goes into water coming out of the tap, and where your water goes when you flush it. So coming back to my my slide here, this default funding asset table, this is pretty typical structure. So what this is saying is, from 0 to $100,000, we're going to assume that that's going to be, any item that's under $100,000 is going to be paid for in cash. We're not going to mess around with trying to get a grant or even a loan for such a small amount. I think you guys have been successful at getting some grants at this level. This is just a generic table where I usually start from. But then when we're talking about anything like from 100,000 to 500,000, obviously you want to be able to put down the typical 20% for a loan, and then the rest might be funded with a loan. When we're in the, 500,000 above, 20% might be kind of hard to save for, and we might assume that the staff is gonna put in the effort to try to find grants, apply for grants, and usually those kinds of grants come with loans. And then when we're talking about millions of dollars or multi-millions of dollars, that's where USDA funding or state revolving fund funding is going to be a likely place you're going to look for funding. And so that's going to be, it's pretty hard to be up above 2 or 5% saving for cash for multi-million dollar projects. That just makes the water rates really astronomical, and so that's where we are. Here's just a quick snippet of what it looks like for the capital improvement plan spreadsheet, which is, I said before, a component of the models that I'm building, or mostly built. And so, you might have a vehicle, a backhoe, and it was acquired in 2000. It's got another 10 years of life to it. And the future cost is going to be 44,000 to replace it. That cost for a backhoe, that might be a used backhoe, honestly. But you're going to try to fund 25% of it with cash, and then the other 75% of a loan. But if we're talking on the order of, almost 500,000 here for a new shop, then we're going to be looking at saving something like 5%, maybe get a grant for 40%, and a loan of the other 50%. And all this goes into a into a spreadsheet. And well, because this shop is probably, if it's got 60 years remaining, it's probably pretty new. I guess in this chart, we're fictitiously in 2010 or 11 here. And so we've got a long time to save to replace that shop. So that's why we're only putting $180 away each year. But with, say the 100 water meters that are going to be failing in 5 years, we're putting away $2,600 a year to be able to make that happen within 5 years. And all these numbers get balanced in a pretty complex Excel formula in the background. But basically, at the end of this capital improvement planning, it's going to give you an annual total that you need, that we suggest you put away for capital improvements. Any questions there? I know that's maybe a little bit of a hard thing to wrap your head around. No? All right, I'll move on. Okay, so in summary, by having the assets and the level of service and understanding the criticality, understanding the life cycle costs, and having long-term funding on the horizon, we're going to be able to save money, hopefully save time, save headaches. And so the major takeaway is plan ahead and build an inventory. And I should probably add a bullet there that says, review this annually, or give your staff the encouragement or the flexibility to review this annually, and encourage them to be able to keep up like that. So any thoughts or questions? I just asked that, but I'll ask again.
Yeah, Chris, thanks for that. That was really helpful. I think it's good context for everybody as we think about how we kind of have to save for the future. So I guess a question I had, maybe it's more for Gloria or John, is sort of like, where are we with our asset management plan? Obviously, Chris has provided a lot of context here, and I know Chris has been working with John, but kind of where are we in really diving into the specifics for us?
I'm trying to, like, where are we financially? Where are we?
Like for the finance committee to look at actual numbers, or for the town board to know, okay. Like Chris is talking about, having an asset management plan of saying, these are all of our assets and this is expected life, this is what we need to be saving, like, what's kind of our plan of attack?
You know,
So-
let's say,
I can answer that, Gloria, if because I have this as the drinking water capital improvements plan, and I think all of the columns are shown. But we've got real estate, we've got vehicles listed, we've got your source, your treatment, we've got the rough age. Some of these dates, I really had to just say, John, give me your best guess on when you think this was, put into place. You know, all of these items are listed, and we've got the remaining life here in this column. And so to give you a number, to replace everything that you currently have, and that's saving for the designated percent, maybe it's 5%, maybe it's 100%. The annual suggested contribution to reserves for replacing what you have in the drinking water system is $236,000 annually. The suggestion for the new items, the new major infrastructure topics, which are, there's a couple that are in the smaller thousands, but there's a $550,000. Here's 1.2 million. Here's 17.5 million. That is suggesting another 252,000 per year that should be saved to be able to make those percentages of cash that we need to fund it with, so that we can get a grant, that we can get a loan. Does
and
that
Chris, this will be outlined in our rate study coming out, like when we.
correct? Yeah, these details will be shared. I probably will
So you
not.
don't have to write it down.
Yeah, no, you don't have to write that down, but I will probably hide some of these columns so that, it fits nicely onto a page, and, we're not seeing every one of those columns, but every row will be shown, of what all the assets are and what we're looking to save annually for. One thing I didn't mention, which is kind of insignificant, but, like if it says not capped, that means it's not a capital cost. It's too small. The utility meters in this case alone is a $2,500 expense. So we're not going to put that in a capital improvements plan, because that falls into what we would consider in the budget as an operational cost.
Okay, that's really helpful. So just giving some context to this, what you've oriented us around is the need for asset management plan. You and John are working on our asset inventory, and then we're going to talk about rates here in a minute. But the outcome, the product that we'll all have to digest at the end of this in the future is the rate study that will include kind of a discussion about our asset inventory and our reserve funding needs.
Right. And so this is the suggestion of what I showed you in detail will basically boil down to, we need to add $400,000 to the revenue this year. And, it's kind of on a moving average as things get replaced. Like once that $17 million budget or budgeted item is installed, then that capital improvements plan, we were not saving for it anymore.
Right.
We're actually paying on a loan for it. So the cost is still kind of there, but it changes to, a debt obligation as opposed to a saving for future funding. So it's still kind of there, but so every year, that's why it's important to adjust this every year. And this is, this is a tool. Obviously, the model that I have is a little bit complex, and it's not something that I would unleash on somebody who's unexperienced building and working with them. But the capital improvements plan, it's a Excel spreadsheet that I've shared with John back and forth, and that he will have as a tool to go forward every year and update the capital improvements plan, take items out that, get replaced, put new items in as they come up as needs. So, yeah, you will have that tool built.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to jump into rates, and just to make sure that it's seamless, the need for saving puts you in a better position to know what your future costs are coming down the line, puts you in a better position to apply for grants and favorable loans, so that we can put this into, and then it is a major component of the capital improvements plan. So what's an adequate rate structure? What's important about it? It does promote the delivery of safe drinking water. It promotes the delivery of adequate quantities and pressure. It allows for debt payment on expansion or improvement projects. And an adequate rate structure also promotes compliance. It can encourage conservation. You guys do have usage charges both on your water and your sewer, so that's encouraging conservation. Encouraging economic development. So basic principles of setting rates. We want to make sure that rates cover the full cost of the service. So that is including putting money away for reserves. So you do have that plant investment fee. I don't really like to break that out, but you guys do, and I'm happy to continue delivering the report in that manner if that's the way you want to move forward. But in my mind, the capital investment fee is something that should just be a part of the rates. So we want to make sure that the rates are also fair and equitable. If we create a commercial category and we're looking at calling, a post office with one bathroom and no shower a commercial business, but we're also calling, a hotel with 18 rooms commercial business and billing them the same, that's not fair or equitable. So we might talk a little bit about EQRs, equivalent residential units. That's how we would assign a heftier cost to a mobile home park that has 18 connections versus an individual home where it's maybe a widowed old person who isn't using very much water. They're paying the same. So we want to use the revenues to pay for the water systems expenses only. I know in a lot of towns, assets or revenue kind of gets commingled between sewer and water. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that, the sewer is supporting the water system or vice versa. Or yeah, the sewer system took a loan out from the roads and bridges and, we really haven't paid them back. So we want to make sure that we are distinguishing what are the costs. And if you do take a look in detail at the capital improvements plan, you will see that some of the vehicles are associated 25% to the water system, 40% to the sewer system. And that's based on John's assessment of, well, we really use that grader a lot to because we're replacing a lot of sewer lines. So that's being heavily used in the sewer system and not so much with the water system. So that's how we kind of, you have some combined assets like vehicles and some tools, and that's how we kind of separate the revenue for the water expense goes to the expenses, or the revenue from the water goes to the expenses for the water versus roads and sewer and bridges and whatnot. Another good practice within the rate setting is to educate the customers on why their rates are what they are. Educating them to, okay, well, you have an ADU, additional dwelling unit above your garage, resident here, and that's why you pay more than your neighbor. So educating, being able to speak intelligently about why there are different rates for different customers is a strong principle that we want to abide by. We also want to make them easy to understand. We don't want them to be too complex. So there's a balancing act there. Also reviewing the rates annually. I will just say that I know that through this rate study process, we realized that there was a rate increase voted on in the past and it hadn't been implemented. And so only in the process of really digging into the revenue, expected revenue versus the ordinances is how your rates for 2024 came to be. I think they should have been where they are now previously in previous years. So reviewing them annually is pretty important. And not to say that you need to hire a consultant like me every year, but you should be you should be reviewing them for accuracy and abiding by the ordinances and the decisions that were made by the board. And also we want to make sure that the rates are based on good budgeting and customer records. One portion of the rate study that I have put another portion of the rate study that I put a lot of effort into is customer usage. You do have a usage charge. And so getting that straight, understanding that what kind of revenue should we expect from the usage versus the base is good to keep an eye on that. And then also we want to make the rates easy to administer. So if they're too challenging to adjust every year, if they're set up in a way that they have to be adjusted every year, and then you've got some turnover in your administrative staff and that knowledge might not get passed on, then that could be a failure in how the rates are administered. Okay, so we will talk about rate structures. EDU, I've heard, it seems like every year I hear a new acronym, but it basically all means the same. I've heard of single family unit, SFU, EQR is the one that pops into my mind, equivalent residential unit, and EDU is what we're seeing on the slide. I think you guys use the term EQR, is that right, Gloria?
Yes, we use that for our refuse fund.
Right, equivalent residential unit. Essentially, we're trying to say that if a residential unit is 1, then a house with an apartment above the garage is 1.5. So that's how we if we have well, there'll be a slide later on that'll go into that a little bit more. But meter size, if you have a high school that's watering a football field and their connection size is 5-6 inch pipe, they take a larger percentage of the infrastructure that's required in storage and treatment, in pumping, to be able to supply that potential amount of water going through a larger 4-inch, 6-inch pipe. Flat rate, that's not something we'll spend much time on, but that would be if you had say a community where everybody had, similar size homes, like in the system I operate, that's a mobile home park. That is probably a flat rate. There's no meters on each one of the mobile homes. So, that's kind of the restricting factor. You guys all have meters on all your connections, so we won't go into that. The rate structure that you currently have is it's a block rate, and it is a increasing rate with only one tier. So you have an increased rate, meaning above 10,000 gallons per bi-month period, you're being charged more for that 1,000-gallon unit. And so we'll go into detail on each one of these here in the next several slides. So the advantages of the increased block here is where you guys are. So I won't spend too much time on the rest of these, but it encourages conservation. If you're charged for more water that you use, you're going to fix that leaky toilet. You're going to, repair a leak as soon as you can. And it also does, if you have a customer that's using a lot of water in their home, whether it's through a leak or they're, just leaving the shower on too long. That's going to also mean you have higher flows in your wastewater system. So the conservation in a water bill is also going to affect the number of gallons that are treated through your wastewater. The only disadvantage there is this may discourage high use industrial customers from locating in the community. Your hotels might find that, oh, it's cheaper to send our laundry out of town to wash than to do it here in town. So I don't anticipate that Silverton has a lot of high water use industry, but I could be wrong. Okay, so meter size, that's going to be based on the size of the connection. And the thing that I'd like you to look at here is that a 5/8 connection has the capacity of 20 gallons. I'm going to say that's 20 gallons per minute. And it's not exactly a straight line as you get into the, 1 inch, it's 50 gallons a minute, but that's still 2.5 times more than what you'd be able to, the flow of water you could have from a 5/8 inch. And just for keeping the math simple, if a 1 inch connection can supply 50 gallons of water per minute, the 4 inch connection can do, the 500. And so the factor, it's not exactly linear, but essentially, if you see the stack of dollar bills here, the base rate could be based on meter size, and so you're going to bring in more revenue from that larger customer, but yeah, it's kind of a visual. Was there a question there? No? Okay, I'll move on. So what's the information we need to gather for the rates? We've looked at budget for 3 years. We've gone over that over and over again. I think Gloria and I probably need to meet one more time to get that all straight. But we're really close to finalizing that. User information, I've put a lot of effort into getting the customer usage information, but I've also put a bit of effort into color coding the customers that I think need to be reviewed and put into further classes. Right now, you just have a normal customer class, one customer class, and then you have a senior discount. But it really does not distinguish between the post office that only has a toilet, no bathroom, no shower, probably just a sink to wash hands, versus your mobile home park that might have 32 connections. So that's an area of improvement that we're going to work on, making customers' bills more equitable between that variation between the post office with only a bathroom and a hand sink versus a mobile home park that has 32 connections. So that is going to be based off of your EQR that you've set up for trash. Any questions there?
Yeah, Chris, I have lots of questions or curious thoughts on this. So this is Dana Cranker. Something that's really stood out in my mind, I've been thinking about this last couple of weeks, has kind of been keeping me up, is this idea that we have, let's say, 700 year-round residents, okay?
Mhm.
And through a couple Chamber of Commerce board meetings, a business summit that we talked about, we've been talking a lot about visitor usage and visitor days and how many visitors our tiny little hamlet accommodates.
Right.
And so having a lot of visitors in our community is a huge benefit. We have a really strong economy because of that. It's super beneficial for our seasonal businesses. It's been beneficial for our sales tax revenue. All of those things are really good for the community, good for the town, good for our economy. But I'm still really stuck on how we plan for the size of a system, whether it's for drinking water or for sewage treatment plant, that has to accommodate the number of people that we see when we're thinking about the number of people that are actually paying certain rates. And I'm just really stuck because again, let's take our 700 year-round residents, just throwing that number out there. We got some recent data that said, you know, our train deposits 230,000 people in a year, in a season. That's a crazy number. It's great. Again, it's great for our economy. It also has a cost to our infrastructure. And then we think of like visitor days and the number of people that come in and out. The numbers that we saw from the Chamber of Commerce market rate study was just staggering, of hundreds of thousands of people. And so I don't know if I'm missing something or what, but how do we think through our ratepayers and what our little community needs to accommodate?
Okay, I think
Does that make sense?
it does, and I know one of my future slides discusses that. And so if we could come back to that question,
That's great.
I
Yep.
think we'll get to some of what you're getting at there, but basically with the EQRs, we're gonna set up, okay, the high school that is watering a football field has a huge demand, which relates to the size of the tank, the size of the treatment that you need, and the EQ, you know, so they're gonna, so I think what am gonna suggest is that high potential user has a higher base rate, okay?
Mhm.
And that's going to pay for the bigger portion of the infrastructure that they require the system to have.
Mhm.
And so then the single, widowed person living in their home doing one load of laundry a week, they're going to be on the, on the EQR side of one.
Mhm.
But if, that single person has, their entire family come for a month, they will be billed, the base rate of one. But then if they have a month where they use a lot of water, their usage rate is going to make them more equitable that, okay, they used a ton of water, so they're not getting this, this rate like every other month.
Yep.
And then conversely, if you have a high school that has a large connection that requires a large portion of their of the infrastructure to be built bigger because they are a bigger customer, they're going to have a base rate that's bigger because that infrastructure is there year round, whether or not they're watering the field year round or not. But
Yeah.
so because they have a larger connection, they might also get a different tier structure for their usage. And that is the part where I think I need another slide to explain.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Yeah, because what sticks out to my mind a lot is that we have a significant change in population in the summer versus the winter, both with visitors, but also just residents that live here in the summer.
Right.
And I know we accommodate for that in some ways, but it just is kind of, like you said, we need folks to understand that they have to pay for a system because they want it to exist when they show up. Our visitors
Exactly.
need it to exist. Our
And that's-
seasonal residents, our businesses need it to exist, even if they're only using it part of the year.
Right. So that's where educating the customers and here tonight, educating board members on those nuances is the first step to being able to educate your customers.
Yep.
Okay, so an accurate connection survey, this is where we have scrutinized the list of categories, and I think my suggestion is going to be that like the refuse EQRs, we adjust your drinking water customers and your sewer customers in a similar fashion. So that is going to be developed in the scenarios that I work through. We'll hopefully get to that. We'll get into that. We definitely will get into that. But then also information that we gathered on the rates is anticipated costs. So, with the $25 million wastewater treatment facility, you're going to have a debt that's going to come along with that grant. So we have anticipated all that. It's built into the model. Reserve funding that we need. We did spend a good amount of time talking about that. And then operational costs. you know, if you're putting a lot of repair and maintenance into the, the end of the life of your water treatment or wastewater treatment facility, we might say, okay, well, once we have a brand new shiny treatment facility, that operational cost is going to probably hopefully go down. So, we look at all those details, and me having the background as an engineer in the water wastewater system or industry, I'm able to ask those questions of John and get to a pretty good estimation. I mean, it's never it's not like I have a crystal ball, but we're getting pretty close to being able to predict where we're at least on the order of magnitude. So setting the rates. So for a metered system with a set block rate, it's going to look like we divide the total budget into fixed and variable costs. And then we develop a base rate based on those fixed costs. And this is where everybody's the same, right? And are the same kind of customer, same meter size. We have the base rate is going to be on the fixed cost. So that's your debt service. That's your administrative fee is how you guys deal with the cost that the water or the wastewater system takes from the through the general fund, not from, but through the general fund. And then the unit rate, that's going to cover the variable costs. The variable costs are going to be things like, okay, the more water you use, the more chemicals you might be using for treatment. Like in the summertime, if you're saying you have a higher demand for water in the summer, well, your operational chemicals for water treatment or wastewater treatment are going to go up. And so having a usage charge that brings in more money in the summer is going to cover the chemicals, the maintenance, the utility, the gas, the electric. And so this is kind of a visual where this is the stack of dollars is the total bill or the total monthly revenue, right? And this bottom portion is the debt payment, the contributions to the reserves, the water quality, the costs that don't move based on number of usage. But the more water that's consumed and demanded, more power is going to be used, more maintenance and repair, more chemicals. So that's kind of answering your question a little bit, I believe. So a single block rate, this doesn't really apply to you. I'm going to kind of skip through this, but let's see here. Oh no. Okay. So let me go back to this. So what I think is, I think we should probably have discussions based on this area here. So the EQR for each different customer, right now it's all one. So every customer is paying the same of this fixed cost. And that's not equitable when you have, a single family home is paying the same cost as, a hotel with 18, 20 bedrooms in it. So the way that we would work that out is we would have an EQR assigned to each customer. And I don't know if we need to go into that list, but you have quite a few vacation homes, you have quite a few hotels, and you also have quite a few RV parks. And so, yeah, the RV parks do require a larger portion of the system to be built, a larger storage, a larger treatment capacity, even though they probably don't have much use in the winter. They still require the infrastructure to be there for the 4 summer months when they have a lot of business and have a lot of visitors. So, they're going to have a higher monthly cost, whether they have any RVs parked there or not in the winter or all year long. And then in the summer, they're going to have in the months that they're bringing in revenue, they're also using more water. They're going to have a higher variable cost. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, we're getting pretty close to the end of my slides, and I think I had some variations where I went into more detail on equivalent residential units in previous versions of this slide. So let me see if I can't find that real quick. But essentially, there's a list that says that develops what are the different like how do we come to that EQR? And I know that you guys have developed one, but you've developed one for the water for the refuse. But let me just pull up the list of yeah, I'm gonna just pull up the EQR list here to show you. So I really think that the way we're going to increase revenue for Silverton is we're gonna assign these EDUs is what it is in this list, but we're gonna assign EQRs. So a you know, there might be a minimum that we set for any kind of home, mobile home parks. Maybe you guys agree with that, maybe you don't. But the mobile home park is going to be per space and per lot. If you have a rental efficiency that might not be using the same amount of water, might not have the same capacity to use water as a single family home, so that might be actually less than one. If you've got a cluster of rental cottages that have a pretty minimal kitchen, we might assign them a the rental cottage or the business that has the rental cottages, they might have a handful of rental cottages. So they would have one EQR. Right now, you might have, a cluster of rental cottages paying the exact same as a single family apartment or home. So that's not going to be equitable. Let's see some other things, it goes into just really detailed minutia about does the church have a kitchen or not? A food service restaurant. I think your refuse EQR does go into the number of room or seats, how many people it can seat. So it's a number per seat. 0.08, or let's just round that up to 0.09 EQRs per seat. So that way, we could really get to be equitable between a restaurant that has 20 seats and a restaurant that has, 33 seats. We could really tailor each restaurant's base bill based on how many customers they can serve. You've got laundromats, schools, swimming centers, and stuff like that. So one thing I have not really asked, or maybe I've asked and I forgot about it, are there many vacant lots? Is there room to improve? I know that there's new connection fees. So I guess my question is is the town growing, or is it, or what, how would you guys describe that?
John.
Yes, we are growing. And it's been variable during and after COVID. We noticed variability the last few years, but we've got plenty of room to grow. It's just getting increasingly more difficult for people to find a spot that's got infrastructure in place. But
Okay,
we're working on a build out analysis right now that we hope to have complete soon. But you will probably have your work done before the build out analysis is complete.
Okay. And my rate model goes, 5 years into the it can predict, or it can consider 5 years into the future. So That's maybe a question that I need to follow up with John and Gloria, but you know, if we think that there was a boom during COVID and maybe we're saying, okay, we're going to have $30,000 in revenue from new connection fees every year, maybe that needs to be adjusted for, you know, maybe there's going to be a tailing off of that. But that's something else that, you know, I mean, there's a lot of different components to consider and build into the rate study. I think we've done a pretty good job of considering all that. My thought is not necessarily the lowest hanging fruit, but where we're going to get the most revenue for, you know, the change that I think we should make is going to an EQR system for the base rates.
And Chris, I think one comment there is we definitely have a high level of seasonality for our businesses. So when we think about EQR, I mean, it's on our agenda to talk about later tonight related to refuse is the talking points or how to communicate with our ratepayers. I think most people can understand EQRs in terms of usage, but for businesses that are seasonal and are closed during certain times of the year, it's a lot harder to make the case to them that they still need to pay into the system. And so considering that seasonality, do you have any thoughts or comments there?
Well, yeah, I would say the rate study is going to be a pretty comprehensive, or the rate study report is going to be a pretty comprehensive document. And it will go into those details of, you know, base versus usage, and it will talk about customers need to, you know, their size does relate to the size of the infrastructure that needs to be there year round, whether or not they are there year round or not. So that's why, you know, having a clear understanding of the EQRs, and I heard you say EQRs on the usage. I want to distinguish that the EQR is really going to distinguish the base rate.
Mhm.
And I've seen it both ways. The more equitable way is, say you have an EQR of 2 versus 1. Right now you're limited to 10,000 gallons with your base rate before you start paying for per gallon. Is that right? Or is that where it changes price? Forgot. I
think over that amount is when you pay more.
Yeah. Okay. So right now, the first 10,000 gallons is included in your base rate, but you can see that I've got, this is how your rates are existing, but you can see that if we say this next column here is a customer that has an EQR of 2, and I'm going to just zoom in real quick so that
And
you
we're
might,
not seeing your spreadsheet, just so you know.
oh, you're not. Okay.
No.
Sorry. Let's see. Let me share new. I thought you were okay. So, sure. Okay. So here is this is how your current rate structure is with your discount to your seniors. It's a little bit less, right? But so if we were to say your base rate here is 2 times. So essentially, you know, you'd be paying twice as much because you are a home with an EDU or you're a duplex or something like that, right? Just I want to keep it at 2 so that the numbers are easy to understand. So the base rate is going to be double, but the usage that you're going to have for that base rate that you're going to get for free before you incur a usage charge would also double.
Okay, so your usage, your like allotted usage would double within that base rate too.
Based on the factor of your EQR. If your
Yeah,
EQR
yeah.
comes out to 1.65, then that would be, you know, not 20,000, but 16,500 or something, right? And that is so what so that's how that would be one adjustment that I suggest we make.
Mhm.
Now the other adjustment that also really needs to be considered is, do we bill folks from, I mean, if the water system really needs to bring in more revenue, it's easy to say, it's hard to swallow, I know, but maybe we don't give 5,000 gallons per month, 10,000 gallons per bi-monthly period for free. You know, maybe that comes down to 6,000 gallons, 3 gallons a month, or 3,000 gallons a month, that come with the base rate. That's going to encourage conservation, which would, you know, has a trickling effect, meaning less wear and tear on the water treatment and less wastewater that needs to be processed. So that's another way to bring in more revenue. Is we would, you know, right now it's just under 10,000, there's no charge. Above 10,000, you get charged per 1,000 gallons after that 10,000. So those are the kind of scenarios that I'm going to be I'm going to want to develop, and that's where you know, it's helpful now that the board is getting a feeling for what are the changes that we can make in the rate structure and the usage structure.
Great, thanks for that. I know I talked a lot. Rhonda, do you have a question that I cut off earlier, or did any of the other?
No, I'll
Trustees?
talk to you later about it.
Okay, great.
Okay, well, I think if you guys don't have any other questions, I would say, I know you guys have other items to discuss, but I really do appreciate you guys taking the time and the effort to listen to this presentation, because I think it's really important to be educated on this, as you guys are going to be the decision makers. And I have shared the PDF printout of this presentation. So if it's something that you know, you want to look at in your own time or with more detail, Gloria has that, and I don't know, she could pass it along to anyone.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris.
All right, guys. Well, I will continue to work with Gloria. We're really close to finalizing what I call scenario 0. That is, my model is making sense to Gloria and to John without making any adjustments yet. And then from there, once we are satisfied that the budget is as best we can get it within a couple of $1,000 margin of error, from that point on, I will want to get input from the EQRs that we land on, and I'm going to want to get input on where do we, if we do change the tiers, how do we do that? And then I will be putting together a set of scenarios documents that shows both for water and wastewater. Here are some options that we should consider. And from there, we can either, you know, eliminate some of the scenarios or refine some of the scenarios, to get to a point where we're making that balance between we're getting closer to bringing in all the revenue we need, and we're also making it equitable and not too painful for the customers. And one final thing I will say is, if you look at my my rate structure kind of synopsis here, or the budget synopsis year over year, there is an option to put in an annual increase to the rates. So instead of jumping up to right where we need to be next year, we could stagger it a little bit by 5 or 10% each year to give mostly businesses, but also residents, a chance to understand that, okay, we're going to have to budget for these increases as they're going to increase a little bit more each year to get where we need to be.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I had a quick question for John before we close the meeting out. So John, just to clarify, because I get this question from residents. Some of our older residents who say, well, we've been paying into the infrastructure for forever and we have new people coming online and they haven't paid in as long. But just to clarify, that's kind of why we require the sewer investment fee and the water fee, like as an upfront lump sum.
That's correct. It's supposed to be earmarked for replacement of infrastructure, essentially water plant pipes, all that kind of stuff. But it just goes into the fund and we use it to operate.
Right, but we're charging new customers who are putting in a new tap, are getting charged an upfront several $1,000 fee,
That's correct.
kind of support their shared contribution to infrastructure.
And that's something else that we're looking at as well, as far as the fee for that,
Amount.
making sure that it comps with other communities and our actual installation costs, et cetera. So.
Yeah, and I would, the only thing I'll add to that, John, I'm sure you know this, but if it's a lump sum fee right now, you might want to change it to a installation fee in addition to a lump sum fee. So there's the, if it, basically so that the water.
Yeah,
That's
we
what
have
it is.
both. Yeah.
Okay, so it's not like,
Two fees,
Separated.
two fees charged at the same time. It's a plant investment fee and a tap fee, which actually pays for the physical work of installing.
okay, good. I want to make sure you have that because I've seen systems kind of eat it without the proper wording in their ordinance.
This is really helpful, Chris. We've needed this for a long time, so we're glad you're here and sharing this. Glad you've been able to work with Gloria and John. Thank you guys for all the work that's gone into this, because I know Chris's model is only as good as the information you guys give him. So we
Exactly.
really appreciate the insight here and the contribution from staff.
All right, well, I will sign off. I'll let you guys get to other issues at hand, but again, I appreciate your attention here, and I look forward to developing scenarios and working with the board to come to a final decision.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
All right, bye, guys.
You guys, if I could just for a second, I made a rare but egregious scheduling miscalculation, so apologies for being so late. If I hadn't looked at my phone and seen Gloria's 5 o'clock text, I wouldn't have been halfway across the park walking my dog, running back to be here late. So I just wanted to say one thing to your point about 700 paying for 230,000, let's just say. That's a problem. I don't know. We'll have to be creative how we're going to solve that problem. And I'm not trying to single out however many millions of visitors we get per year. They all use our infrastructure. They pay sales tax. They support our businesses. They pay livings, people make livings off of our visitors. So that's something to consider, that we're the 600 that aren't business owners, or the 500 or whoever the people that aren't business owners. That's the tricky one here in our community, especially. And that's kind of like, I don't know if we've really cracked that nut, but the EQRs, and I would say based on some of the things that Chris has said, that Gloria and I are definitely going to piggyback and add to a lot of the stuff that Chris is bringing to us, because it's not tailored to our community. So we are definitely, before we bring you guys recommendations, I just wanted to pitch that in there, that we're not just going to bring you Chris's recommendations. We're going to vet that very carefully with respect to this community. And then you all can look at it and say, great, or we don't want to do anything, or we're going to go totally different directions.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it is recognizing how unique we are. And this is just the thing that keeps hitting me, is that it's super important for our economy to be vibrant, for us to support as a board in ways that we can, our businesses, to support our seasonal residents, seasonal businesses, and recognize that we have to have those year-round services. And again, I think what's has stood out to me is the our chamber meeting, our business summit, just recognizing the sheer numbers that we have actual data for, the number of people that visit our beautiful location. And that we have to accommodate them and we have to have infrastructure that does that. So.
Did I miss any significant questions for me that I was on? Okay. Well, we'll keep having this dialogue. And if you guys have questions, feel free.
Actually, and Chris skipped this slide. This was sent to us in the original packet. But the new well slide.
New well has been put way on the back burner.
Okay. And that, I know you had told us that before, but I had a ton of questions about that, which last time you addressed the board, I think a lot more answered, but then I was like, oh, are we back? And so I wasn't sure.
No, because
But,
we
okay.
had received data since that project
Yeah.
was first in the planning stages. We received data that was a dead end compared to other priorities.
Right, and that's sort of what I thought, and I just wanted to make sure that because the cost and the water quality and the yield, but okay, perfect. Thank you.
You bet.
Let me piggyback on what John said, and this is for Dana too. We're not the only community that has this issue of thousands of people coming a day. If you'll take a look at Alaska, when those cruise ships come in to like Sitka,
Yeah.
some of the other small communities, they also have the same issue. And it might be worth making a phone call to those communities and see how they handle it.
Mhm.
Well, URA is similar. You know, they get a lot of visitation and they're similar size. I think there are similar communities in Colorado.
Mhm.
And I would definitely like to do some more research on that before we come up with final
Yeah,
solution.
but I mean, how do they handle it? I'm sure they have some,
Yeah,
they have the same problem we do. People come in, get off the boats, they go eat lunch, they go use bathrooms.
Mhm. Mhm.
So you're talking about cruise ships.
Yeah, and we're
Talking about a larger
with the train.
community with economy of scale. Even if you've got 10,000 people paying the utilities versus 700,
Right.
it's hard the smaller a community is, the more expensive it is for each individual ratepayer
Right. But
to operate the system.
some small communities up there. And so let's just ask them, what do they do?
Yeah. And I think we aren't the only ones like this. I just think, yeah, it's definitely a tricky pickle. Because I think what's hard for the general public to understand is that even if sales tax has gone up, like sales tax revenue at the town level, that doesn't necessarily relate to our enterprise fund when we're having to invest in this infrastructure. And so I think that's the disconnect sometimes for the public, because they think, well, sales tax revenue is up, like you guys should have the money in the coffers to make some of these investments or grant matches or whatever. It's like, well, actually, no, because that's general fund versus enterprise funds. So we have a bit of educating to do, I think. But it sounds like at the very least, so our current water sewer doesn't really have much differentiation in it, except for the usage of the over 10,000 gallons, right? Our base rate is pretty much the same.
Right, and he alluded to it here, but thinking about a more robust tier system.
Yeah, right, which we don't have at all right now.
Right. And then if this work session like elicits any more questions or ideas, like please feel free to shoot me an email. We want to make sure we address everything as we go through this rate study. And I think that's why I wanted Chris to be in front of you all to get a feel for where you guys are at. Because, he doesn't want to put this together blindly. And like John said, we'll definitely be tailoring it once we get the report, but just wanted to give you that permission to send me any kind of comments or emails on this.
Great. Any other questions from board members? Hey, I didn't quite get a sense from him on timing. Do we know what we're thinking?
I thought we had our
We're
last
close.
meeting, but
Yeah.
apparently we have another one.
I mean, do you see the rate study being? When do you think we would all be talking about it again with actual?
I would like to be talking about this in August and September,
Coming into budgets.
going into budget. It's crucial.
Yeah.
And I think we're really close to a final, like Gloria said, I think we're close to a final draft from Chris.
Mhm.
And then we will huddle
Yeah.
And then you all will be brought into the conversation as well, I'm sure, so.
Yeah, my goal is somewhere around, beginning of budget season, so we can get it some time to wrap our heads around it.
Great. This seems like a huge resource, so thank you.
Oh, Chris has been great.
Great.
And our CAC and all of our technical assistance with EPA, like, we've received a lot of assistance. Just helpful. I just wish they would give us money instead of.
Yeah. Well, at the Attorney General meeting on Thursday, I kind of gave some context for like, again, we're 700 people and we host all of these visitors. And I think a variety of them came up to me last time and they're like, wait, you don't have a hospital? You don't have, and we're like, no, and we manage all of these people in our backcountry. And so I think it's eye-opening for folks to come and kind of recognize that nuance that we're dealing with.
Most of those people had no idea where Silverton was.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
Are you open in the winter?
All right, well, this was our work session. The time is 6:38. We'll adjourn the work session and we'll reconvene at 7 o'clock for our regular meeting. Thanks.
Great.